Today I want to talk about one of my favourite piano concertos. It was written by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart in 1784 in Vienna, and it's his Piano Concerto No. 15 in B flat, Köchel No. 450. Now, of all the piano concertos he wrote, more or less 27, depending how you want to categorize them, this is the one that I keep going back to, and actually I enjoy the most. But sadly, it's not recorded or even performed as much as I would like. I have managed, however, to find a number of really good recordings and made a very small selection so that later on in this talk I will be comparing different recordings of this piece, looking at the tempo, the phrasing, the usual things that I do in these series of videos, and then you can decide for yourself which one you prefer, or even nominate in the notes and the comments which one you would have gone for, which one you would have nominated. Now, if you don't want to have the background on Mozart's life and why I've chosen this piece, then you can just use the chapters which are in the description below and click straight through to the comparison. But let's go back to this piece. Why number 15? Because obviously number 20, 21, 23, very famous, very popular. Even number 9 is performed a lot. This piece has something very, very special in it. As I say, it was written in 1784. Mozart was really on a roll at this point. He was really enjoying his life in Vienna, and he was under a lot of competition. There were lots of composers trying to get the top spot and get the top venues. And because of this competition and because of his drive, I think he was really at a peak. He would have been around 28 at this time, and around the time he joined the Masons. This was all part of trying to become firmly established as the greatest, and especially as a performer. So you can imagine it a bit like a pop superstar coming into their zone and becoming world famous. But a few years later, his notoriety will begin to dwindle a little bit. But that's not because I think the public likened him less. He was just no longer the new sensation. So he wrote 12 piano concertos, I think between 1784 and 1786, if I'm correct. In fact, number 15 is what I call one of a pair, the sort of the two different sides of a coin, or of the same coin. The 15 in B flat and 16 in D major. And if you play the 16 straight after the 15, I'm sure you'll see what I mean. The move from B flat to D major. And in D major, Mozart really comes alive. He's bright. It sounds like the beginning of The Marriage of Figaro, which he wrote a few years later, of course. So back to 15. 15 I like very much because, as Mozart said himself in a letter to his father in March in 1784, he says, "The concerto Herr Richter praised so highly is the one in B flat. It's the one I did first, and he already praised it here," meaning in Vienna. "I find it impossible to choose between the two concertos. I think they're both concertos that make you sweat. But as far as difficulty is concerned, the B flat has its advantage over the D major. I'm actually quite curious to know which of the concertos you and my sister like best." So why he says it's an advantage is because he was using the concerto to show off his prowess. And I think one of the reasons why it's not recorded so much, one of the reasons it's not performed so much, is because at times it is extremely difficult. And if you have a really great performer like the ones that I've chosen today, and I'm going to put a link into a live video of a performance from the BBC Proms, which is phenomenal, and there you can see all the hand movements and the crossing and just how challenging it is. It really was to his advantage because the people could go wow at his performance and wow at the music. But what makes this even more special for me is in fact the second movement. Now, Haydn wrote about Mozart that not only is he a genius composer in the composition and structure, he's also got extremely good taste. And it's really clear. So you see a man at the height of his prowess, if you like, really being ambitious, but still with really good taste. And the second movement, some people say that he may have been influenced by the second movement of Haydn's Symphony. I think it's number 65. But if you compare them, they are very different, but in a similar feel. The second movement is so sublime. Well, you'll hear it in due course. I'll play you excerpts of it. Okay, so that's enough on the piece. I first got to know this recording probably around the age of 16, when my brother bought this recording as a Christmas present for my father. And this is the one from Ingrid Haebler with the London Symphony Orchestra and Colin Davis. And I've had this record in my collection, ever since my brother kindly gave it to me when my father died. And it's something I've played over and over and over again, so I know that recording very well. But for those of you who don't know much about Mozart, I'll give you a very, very brief overview. Mozart was born in Salzburg, which was then the Holy Roman Empire, but is now known as Austria today, in 1756. And he lived until the age of 35, dying in 1791. He was the youngest of 7 children. He had an older sister who I think was around 4 years older than him, and Mariana. And only he and her survived. The first 5 children all died in infancy. So not only is it a miracle that of all those children, he and his sister survived, it's just incredible to imagine what the others may have been in other circumstances. His father, Leopold, was a violinist and also a composer. I don't know much about his mother. We know quite a lot about Mozart and his father and the relationship between them, because the letters are all published and you can read them all in translation format or on the websites now, but you can also buy the books of it. It's absolutely fascinating. It gives you a great insight into life around his time. And what is important to remember, that when Mozart moved away from his family, he went to Paris and then back to Salzburg, and then ended up for a while in Vienna. He liked Vienna very much. It was based upon a life that he had growing up as a child prodigy, and his father proudly took him and his sister around to the UK, England, and all different European countries, showing them off basically. And Mozart wrote his first symphony at the age of 8, and I think that was on the way to London. I hope I'm correct. I think Mariana probably helped him with some of the harmony at that point, because she was an extremely gifted musician as well. So, but one of the things I think is also important to remember when considering Mozart's life, you should not see it as a life of a struggling composer working day and night at the desk writing great pieces of work. It's very, very true. He did, but he also had to organize concerts. He had to compete with the others, as I said earlier in this talk. And he even set up a subscription basis in Vienna where people could buy, for example, 10 tickets or pay a certain amount of money, which would give them access to 10 private concerts. And in one of his letters, I think it was probably in February, around that time, in 1784, the year of this concerto, there's a list of all the concerts he does, and I will put them up on the screen. But I mean, it's just literally every day he's got a concert basically, which he has to either organize or get invited to and stay friendly with. So he needs to socialize with these people, and he's writing at the same time. It's incredible, and there is references from his father to suggest that maybe his father thought he wasn't working quite hard enough. So there he is living in a rather nice house, but due to the success of his concertos in Vienna with his wife, and composing at night, performing in the evening, and and doing everything he needs to do, printing tickets and organizing things during the day. What a life. So there we go. So let's get started, shall we, on Mozart's Piano Concerto No. 15 in B flat. Now, I've chosen a number of performers for this. I've gone with Ingrid Haebler, as I mentioned already, with Colin Davis, the London Symphony Orchestra, Perahia with the English Chamber Orchestra, Alfred Brendel with the Academy of St. Martin's in the Fields under Sir Neville Marriner. But I've also chosen Mitsuko Uchida with the English Chamber Orchestra, same as Perahia, but she's gone for Geoffrey Tate as the conductor, and it'll be interesting to see what influence Geoffrey Tate can bring on the timing and precision. And then I've also gone for something very, very different. Ronald Brautigam, who's playing a forte piano, so one of the original pianos. I'm only going to play a little bit of this because it's so different. Wonderful, but so different it's difficult to keep contrasting with. But that's with the Köhler Academy under Mike Alexander Willens, which the Köhler Academy means the Cologne Academy, basically. But they're all available. You can find them all on your favourite channels, streaming channels, and hopefully all the CDs or LPs are still available from that selection. Well, let's get started. I'm going to open with Ingrid Haebler, play at the beginning of the first movement. I'm going to let it run for a little while so you get a flavour of how this piece sounds. So that's the opening. You've got a traditional for Mozart. You have the orchestral, almost like an overture to the beginning of an opera, as I said earlier. So you have the beginning and then the entry of the piano. And what you'll find is this is very typical in number 15, that you'll have orchestra, solo piano, then the orchestra again, and then piano and orchestra together. So the orchestra playing tutti, all playing together. And the genius of Mozart, as you will discover, is that you play a phrase and then that phrase is repeated. And it's how you play that repeated phrase, how much variety, how much emotion, how much contrast and colour you can bring in as you compare those two. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play you Murray Perahhia's opening, just where the piano comes in. We're going to play a little bit of the orchestra, and then you can hear how the piano comes in. Now, completely different style. I've let it run forward, but listen to also the end of that phrase, da 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 da, because you will see that it's quite different from Alfred Brendel. And Ingrid Haebler, she just comes down da 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 bom 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 bom. No extra notes or coloration, and that's totally allowed to bring this coloration in. It's exactly what Mozart would have done in his day. I'm absolutely sure of that. So let's listen to Alfred Brendel from this very first piano entry again. You see, he puts a whole run in there. Another thing we will notice, apart from the phrasing and the playing, should we say it's not bombastic isn't the word, but it's certainly more confident, more certain than Perahia, is the fact that the recording of Brendel's piano is set further back. So there's more air, there's more space in the recording for the piano. That's a personal choice, whether you like the closer recording, more of the intimate, like you're actually sitting at the piano that we have with Perahia, whether you like that further setting back of Brendel. But you can see it's now getting quite a complex structure. Now, what's next? I think I'm going to take you to Ingrid Haebler and that first piano cadenza as well, to see, just listen again to see what she's doing. Dum bum 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 in the orchestra. Da 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 bum bum. No coloration, no nothing added at all. Now we'll listen to Murray Perahia doing exactly the same piece. See, he adds all that extra coloration, all that extra intonation. And then number 6, we're going to listen to Brendel one more time here. You see, completely different versions. And now I'm going to play the Uchida version. Here we go. Beautifully delicate. I really like this recording, this performance. Okay, I love the way the piano's recorded, I like the whole acoustic, I like the setup of it, but I like the joy that she's bringing, this light openness. It's in B flat, but it gives you the same feeling of a kind of D major concerto, the concerto. It's just so joyous, and her lines flow so delicately. But maybe you have a very different opinion. Maybe you prefer the more romantic or Beethoven-esque performances of some of the others. Let's just, for a second, go back to listen to how that delicacy, beyond measure, I've written here for Uchida. Just listen to this a little bit. That beautiful run in. It's like water and glass, isn't it? Marvellous. They're all incredible. This is just a matter of personal taste, absolutely. So now I suggest, because we need to move on, I'm going to play you now the Uchida taking us to the end of the first movement, just to get a feel of how that first movement ends. Marvellous. So that gives you a flavour for the first movement of the piece, the opening of the piece. And I've just come back from a trip to Vienna, and the majesty, if you've never been there, I highly recommend visiting. It's such a wonderful place. I used to think that London was big and grand, but when I visited Vienna and I saw the squares and the opera house, and it's just magnificent. It's almost too much, to be honest. It's a little bit over the top. So I think Haydn's comment about Mozart having excellent taste is really important here, because it's so easy in that environment to be over the top. And in this next movement, we're going to have, well, you're in for a real treat. The English poet Philip Larkin, a 20th century poet, wrote in his poem Wits and Weddings, there's a little line. It's a poem about wedding couples getting onto trains and driving and chugging off onto their honeymoons. And there's a little line where he's describing the platform and the sunlight and the people on the platform. And he writes, "Sunlight detracts from what's happening in the shade. I hope I've got that right, but basically that's it. And I think this is the same with Mozart. We can be very concentrated on these beautiful melodies, but the real beauty and the real depth, I think, with Mozart is what's happening in the shade, and how conductors and performers are able to bring that story forward and show it to us. So to open the second movement, I'm going to go for Alfred Brendel. Listen to the pace, and I'm going to play it a little bit through. So again, like the end of the first movement, you get a bit of a flavour of what it is. Isn't that marvellous? Isn't that the work of a genius on form? I don't know. For me, this is beyond marvellous, to be honest. And it's great to see how Brendel is conducting from the piano, and how wonderful the Academy of St. Martin's of the Field is. Sorry, what am I saying? Sir Neville Marion is conducting this one. And it's just marvellous, the control that he has over that orchestra, and the perfection of bringing it together. Let's switch now to Perahia with the opening of the second movement. Now, I'm stopping because when you listen to Perahia playing that opening, the big difference for me is the fact that, okay, the orchestra, some of the entries are not perfect like they were under Sir Neville Marriner. It doesn't matter, because when the solo piano comes, Perahia, because he's basically conducting from the piano, is able to change the tempo and increase the space between each phrase. He can literally stop and then continue and create this wonderful emotion, wonderful colours and pictures purely through his phrasing. Now, let's hear how Uchida, and I've just played by accident a little bit of that tiny opening, how Uchida does it. Now, Uchida, like Brendel, has a conductor, Geoffrey Tate, to help her get that orchestra to come in exactly on time. Have a listen to this. I'm such a fan. Now, the tempo is a bit quicker, isn't it, here? But that doesn't bother me in the slightest, because every time the piano has a solo, she's able to bring all the contrast in. And I want to just play you something I picked up on, which I call the magic of Geoffrey Tate. Now, one of the big challenges for any conductor, for any orchestra, any string ensemble, is obviously to begin exactly together. So imagine you've got a violin and you have to begin your bow, and you want it to be as soft as possible, but you want the note to be clear, but you don't want to have of the rosin of the bow on the string at the beginning of the downward stroke. And this is the big challenge for orchestras when playing Mozart. And here they're all pretty amazing. But, you know, if this is the Olympic Championships, listen to how Geoffrey Tate brings that orchestra in here. Listen. Listen again, first note. Again. Perfect phrasing. Just one more time, that opening note. It's sublime. That is one of the signs of a really fantastic orchestra, the English Chamber Orchestra under Geoffrey Tate. Now, I'm being too self-indulgent pointing all these things out, and maybe I'm spoiling it for you, but I do definitely recommend that you just need to listen to this piece of music all the way through. I don't know how long it is. It's only about 20 minutes, 25 minutes or something, in its entirety. Just choose one of the recordings. It almost doesn't matter which, and just listen to it right through, because then you'll get the context of everything. And now I'm just going to play that exactly same point, but with Ingrid Haebler and Colin Davis. Now, I'm sorry if I'm going to ruin it for you, but Colin Davis is also really good conductor, really good at getting tones and colours and precision from his orchestra. But he has this irritating habit of singing or humming. And here you can, if you listen really closely, you might not hear it through the simple room mic I've got set up here. But when you're listening at home, you might well hear it. And when you hear it, it's basically impossible to unhear it. But I'm going to play you the entry anyway, because it is rather beautiful, but very different from the others. His humming's very much in the background there, but it's nice. I'm going to take you forward now to Brendel's second movement with the orchestra entry here, and then we'll listen from there. Now, if you are a Alfred Brendel fan, I recommend listening to this all three movements in one go without any interruption, because the way he opens the first movement, and the way he plays the first movement is quite powerful. And here he's being so delicate. And Sir Neville Marriner is, well, it's very much like Geoffrey Tate. I know they're both British. You must think I'm biased, and maybe I am, but it's just the pieces. I had a whole list of recordings I could have chosen, but I went for these because they're just so marvellous. Now we're going to pick up with Perahia, with the solo piano to the pizzicato. And there's a section in the second movement where there's pizzicato in the strings. It comes later into this clip, and it's interesting to listen to how the different conductors take that. So with some, the pizzicatos, you probably almost won't hear them, and others, like in Colin Davis, well, they'll be quite clear. Well, let's just listen to Perahia and the second movement with him conducting his own English chamber orchestra. You see, they're there, they're very delicate in the background, and they just make a lovely sort of contrast to the flowing piano, the little pizzicato. So let's now move to Ingrid Haebler in the same place. quite different. I think you'll agree. Also, the quality of the recording is not quite as good, but it's a much older recording, but still nonetheless very, very enjoyable to listen to. Again, you can hear him there. I don't know whether you did, but if you listen very closely, you can hear him. But I don't know why people don't say anything to him in the recording studio. I've got a recording of Handel Messiah, and it's so wonderful with him. But there are moments where he's really humming loud, and even before the orchestra comes in, so you get to go, and then the orchestra comes in. It's amazing. I know maybe he was treated like a god, and no one dared say anything. I don't know. So let's just see how Uchida plays that same element and the relationship between her and the orchestra with Jeffrey Tate, and how he decides to handle the contrasting pizzicato. So much more in the background, allowing the piano there to sing over everything. And this now is just a matter of interpretation. It's a matter of personal choice. So we'll ask Ingrid Haebler to take us to the end of this second movement, and then we will move on from there. You hear a horn very clearly going bah, bah, bah. In this version. If you listen to the others, on some of them the horn is actually not even there almost. Very difficult for horn players to come in that delicately and be perfectly on the tune and get everything correct. But it's marvelous when you hear it. I think it must be so scary being a horn player, because if you make a mistake, everyone hears it. If you're the one in the second violins and on row number 2 and you make a slight error, probably no one's going to pick up on it. But that's taken us to the end of this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful second movement. And it's worth noting maybe that Ingrid Haebler was born in Salzburg, brought up very much with the Mozart tradition, made a career and became famous of her performances of Mozart because of the simplicity, because of the delicacy, but because of the strict adherence to what's written and not too much embellishment. And actually, I like that. There are days when I really, really welcome this. Okay, we're going to move on now to Murray Perahia opening the third movement. Wow. That's just where obviously the solo piano will come in. The problem we have, the challenge that we have with the third movement is it's very easy to convert it into a kind of what my father used to call oompa, like you imagine some German Bavarian drinking song. And I think it really needs to be avoided at all costs. So let's see how Uchida and Jeffrey Tate handled this third movement opening. From the piano, sorry. Stage is set, ready for that next piano entry to come in. And now we're going to switch to Ronald Brautigam with the Köhler Akademie. And the Köhler Akademie, or the Cologne Academy in English, under Michael Alexander Willens. Now, be prepared. This is on traditional instruments. We're using a forte piano. And I imagine it's going to sound very much like the pianos sounded in Mozart's time. So let's just see what that would sound like. Now, I love that. I think that's marvelous. I think the timing, the phrasing of this, for me, is perfect. It's very Viennese. It's really controlled. It's got everything for me. That performance, and I would strongly recommend giving it a listen all the way through, so your ears obviously adjust to that point. Let's go to Brendel here in the third movement, from that piano solo to that second to the second subject there. It's such a marvellous piece. I love it. This ending, this third movement is great. But we're going to go back to Haebler, Ingrid Haebler, and we a little bit further into this last movement, because I then will give you a good idea of how that movement develops here. tempo, of course, very different. Now, I think Colin Davis's conducting there is, I would consider that a little bit old-fashioned, that slowing down. And you get the feeling here that Haebler's trying to speed it up a bit there. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. But in my Bach talk, the talk on the Brandenburg Concerto No.5, there was a lot of comments made that everybody was playing it too fast, because the recordings made in the 50s, 60s and early 70s even were much slower than a lot of the recordings made today. And here it's kind of, it's similar story that Uchida is taking it quicker, but I don't mind that. I think it works in Mozart. As long as all these runs, which are very difficult, we heard Brendel go, as long as they sound easy, as long as that you don't hear the pianist struggling or tripping up, as long as you can hear every single note and they're delicately played or whatever, they're precise, I don't mind that a slightly quicker tempo, to be honest. Especially in this piece, it's the last movement of a piano concerto. It can go quite quickly. Let's go back to Brautigam and his traditional interpretation of this. I love it. I just love that phrasing. There's no umparish, as my father would say to it. There's no Bavarian beer garden approach to that phrasing and timing. So let's just take Perahia to give us the ending. Why not? I don't know which one I could choose from all of them. But if I had to take two, I've got my Haebler anyway. I'm not letting that go for sentimental reasons. But I do think that Mitsuko Uchida and the Perahia ones are probably the two I would keep on my desert island if I could only have two. This here Perahia taking this third movement to the end, and I'm going to play a little bit into it. Yeah, with that big sounding ending there. That's Murray Perahia with the English Chamber Orchestra, conducted by himself. I hope that's given you a flavour. I do advise you also to listen to number 16. So just choose one of them, play it all the way through, and then play number 16 straight after. And then you'll have this great, great experience. Share your comments, please, and with your favourites. Maybe there's a version that you like very much that I didn't select, or maybe I have never even heard of before. I'm sorry this one went on a long time, but I hope you enjoyed it nonetheless. And, well, if you have been, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. And until then, enjoy the music.